There's this channel that I'm sure many of you have seen called WR4K. He makes really in-depth reviews of watches. Many of them are high-tier pieces, as he calls them. For the most part, I really like his videos. What's interesting, though, is that his most viewed videos are almost all reviews of watches made by this company called Pagani Design. And specifically, his most viewed video is a comparison of the Rolex Submariner and Pagani Design's homage/copy of the Submariner, the PD1661. This video is somewhat shocking. At face value, it's not just incredible to see just how similar these models are. It's not just that Pagani Design have replicated the size, shape, and weight pretty much down to a T. It's the whole package, all so close in every way. And not just that, there are aspects of the Pagani Design Submariner that are actually better executed. How is this possible when one watch costs $10,000 plus and the other like $100? And what is this brand Pagani Design? How are they legally able to just blatantly replicate not just the Submariner, but a whole host of iconic luxury watches? Let's find out. Like many of these newer Chinese watch manufacturers, it's actually difficult to parse out a clear history of this brand. One very official looking site says that Pagani Design started in 1984, another says 2012. 2012 is what the official site says, but as we'll find out later, just because you put official in your website doesn't mean it's official. With that being said, it seems to have all started in Guangzhou, China. If Pagani Design did get their start prior to 2012, there's not much evidence of their watches at least circulating the internet around that time. To make matters even more difficult, you can't actually parse out one single obvious brand behind the Pagani Design project, so to speak. Also, how old are these workers? If these are the people they're showing in the picture on the site, it makes you wonder, how old are all the other workers? Pagani Design is just like, oh, these are our senior watchmakers. Also, there are loads of Pagani Design watches on Amazon and AliExpress, mimicking just about every one of your favorite watches. Either this is intentional and Pagani Design functions more like a big franchise of companies like Seagull and other Chinese watch manufacturers, or this is just part of the game with lax Chinese copyright laws. More on that later. But since 2012, these watches have really blown up in popularity primarily because of their, well, design. And not originality of design, but rather lack of originality. Because Pagani Design primarily makes homage watches, watches meant to look like other, more famous, iconic watches. Oh, they're also really popular because of the price tag. Now, actually, the most consistent criticism from watch enthusiasts toward Pagani Design is not necessarily with the watches themselves or with their quality for their price point. It's mostly the frustration that Pagani Design only does these homage watches when they clearly could make some pretty high quality original stuff. Now, that isn't entirely true anymore. Here's an example of an original design for a pilot's watch from Pagani Design that's pretty cool actually, and it really isn't any more of a copy in terms of design than what we see from well-known manufacturers. Pagani Design made their mark at a time when copycat watches were becoming increasingly popular. Prior to the internet, fake Rolexes could be found in flea markets around the world, and some of them were even shipped into the States, often alongside other shady products. But the dawn of the internet brought this whole idea of homage watches to the forefront. Chinese manufacturers became capable of not only mimicking the outer design of, say, a Rolex Submariner or an AP Royal Oak, they could even replicate the movement, all for a literal fraction of the price. Pagani Design took a different route. Instead of hiding their intentions, they proudly slapped their logo right on these kinds of watches, and instead of faking the higher-end movements, they gave their watches trusty, reliable Japanese calibers from the likes of Seiko and Miyota. Over time, their catalog grew to include not only Rolex and Omega homages, but even designs meant to emulate, iconic watches from Tissot, which this kind of thing really frustrates people.
I somewhat understand it when brands copy the likes of Rolex, because those watches are so expensive that they're offering an affordable alternative. But when they copy the likes of the Tissot PRX and Seiko Cocktail Time, well, that's just embarrassing.
Even the name Pagani Design isn't original. Pagani is literally a supercar manufacturer. As a side note, Pagani, the car manufacturer, actually did try to block Pagani Design from using its name in Japan by filing a trademark opposition with the Japan Patent Office. Pagani argued that putting Pagani design on watches would confuse consumers with their luxury car brand. I mean, it doesn't look good to have people thinking that Pagani, the company making supercar art, was just stooping to the level of copying luxury watch brands. But the JPO rejected the claim, noting rather hilariously that Pagani, the car company, had almost no presence in Japan, only 2 cars sold, and that cars and watches were considered different markets. And as a result, Pagani Design kept its trademark rights in Japan and the car maker lost the case. I'll be honest, it's pretty bad because Porsche Design watches are directly related to Porsche the company, so Pagani Design, it does make you think of, Pagani cars, especially if you're familiar with cars. Regardless, how can a company with an unoriginal name and even more unoriginal watch designs make and sell these timepieces? How is this all possible? And perhaps more important, are they any good? Now, one of the reasons brands like Pagani Design exist at all has to do with how intellectual property and copyright laws are enforced, or rather how loosely they're enforced in China. While international agreements such as TRIPS technically bind China to respect design patents, in practice the enforcement is inconsistent and it often favors domestic manufacturers over, foreign rights holders. Watch designs in particular fall into a gray area. A case shape, dial layout, bezel insert, these things can be protected in countries like Switzerland or the US, but in China, these protections are harder to uphold, and lawsuits against copycats rarely succeed. In one example from 2004, FP Journe filed a lawsuit against Jacques Droz, which is a Swatch Group brand, alleging design copyright infringement, the 3 visible screws, and a figure 8 arrangement on the dial. FP Journe claimed that this configuration was uniquely theirs and constituted infringement. Jacques Droz had drawn the design elements from their own historical pocket watches, not from FP Journe's modern pieces. The case dragged through appeals for nearly 5 years, and it ultimately concluded in favor of Jacques Droz. I do not know how to say that name. FP Journe was even ordered to pay 40,000 euros to Swatch Group. Now, I'm not saying that Jacques Droz was doing the same thing Pagani Design does. Not at all. I'm just showing that it is complicated. This kind of thing isn't simple. And with these companies being located in China, it makes it that much more difficult to litigate. The result is a kind of legal loophole that allows Chinese companies to reproduce the look and feel of luxury watches with just slight modifications. In the Chinese manufacturing ecosystem, homage and outright imitation are not only tolerated, but they've become an entire business model fueled by massive production capacity and also great watchmaking, as many Chinese manufacturers have ties to legacy watch brands. And also, there's a global market that wants these affordable alternatives. This goes beyond just watches, motorcycles, toys, smartphones. This is just a rampant thing in general in Chinese industry. If you do see this as a problem, then the real problem lies with us consumers, because the truth is many people are thrilled at the idea of spending like $100 to have a watch that is almost indistinguishable from a $10,000 one, and that actually are, high quality for the price. If you're in the boardroom and you need a specific watch to get ahead, the $600 to $800 full-on Chinese clones that even have Rolex or Omega right on the dial alongside copycat movements, I get it. I'm not saying that it's okay. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it's just a product of this industry. It makes sense that people buy these. One commenter recently described it as more of a Robin Hood scenario. Companies like Pagani Design steal designs from the rich to give to us poor, which I think is pretty funny. Where enthusiasts really get frustrated is when you move, from taking high-end luxury designs from brands that sort of gatekeep their watches instead of making them available to everyone to more affordable luxury watches like Tissot and Longines. I think for watch enthusiasts, there's a bit of disconnect. The more time you spend in this hobby, the more you realize that getting a luxury watch has nothing to do with people around you and those seeing what you own and wear. It should just be for you, because nobody pays attention to your watch. Nobody cares. So if you're going to spend a lot of money on a watch, it better be for you, or you're not really going to enjoy it. And so wearing a fake watch kind of kills the whole point. And also, in reality, many of the watch designs that we know and love are also homages, or at least close to it. Seiko's SKX033, for example, was basically a baby Submariner. Does the Seiko SPB 143 look more like the 62 Moss that it is apparently a recreation of, or does it look like a Tudor Black Bay? Tissot's PRX is a copy of their own Sea Star, but the original Sea Star Quartz from 1978 itself wasn't unique at all. It looked like a whole slew of watches from the 70s. Would the Hamilton Jazzmaster or all of the racing-inspired Panda chronographs on the market, would they exist today without the Daytona? Just the other day, Seiko released this new speed timer automatic, the SRQ-055, and it's literally a mashup of a Speedmaster and a Daytona. At least it looks like it. Dive watches, without the 50 fathoms, most dive watches wouldn't look the way that they do today. The point is that watch design always has some level of copying in it. Even giants like Omega, Rolex, IWC, they've borrowed pretty liberally from predecessors or even rivals. So copying in this sense, it's sometimes respectful and other times it's, opportunistic cloning. And sometimes even watches that are inspired homages can become icons in their own right. Is Pagani design really that much worse when all they're doing is just going maybe a step further than the other companies? I'll leave that up to you. Now, I'm not going to lie, as I dug into this, my curiosity started to get the better of me, and I just had to find out for myself what these watches were like. So I went straight to the source, at least I hope it's the source, and I picked up a Pagani design watch from one of these very official looking websites. I reluctantly gave them my credit card information and placed the order. 2 weeks later, this arrived at my doorstep. Okay, actually, there's been some developments, so I'll keep it brief. This site is not Pagani Design's official site. There is no official site for this company or any really manufacturer like this in China. There are loads of very official looking Pagani Design sites, but they're just resellers. I actually reached out to this site's email because I wanted to switch my order right after placing it because, well, I watched some reviews and I don't actually think that this watch I picked is the best example of a Pagani design watch done well. After a few days, I got a response saying that they'd already shipped it, so in the end, I just jumped on AliExpress and got a different Pagani watch. So we actually have two watches to look at. But the best advice that people give typically is that if you want one of these watches, the official looking sites are just resellers that are upcharging. The route to go is AliExpress. It's way cheaper, and you do have some level of protection at least. A few weeks later, the watches arrived on my doorstep. I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty excited to see what these watches were all about. I was having that same feeling you get when you're finally about to unbox that high-end luxury watch that you've been waiting for. Interesting. So here they are, guys, the PD1671 version 2, meant to look, of course, like the Tudor Black Bay, and more specifically to look like the Black Bay 58 in that nice blue, and the PD1717 meant to look like the Longines Spirit 37. Let's start with the 1671 Black Bay Homage. First, the most obvious thing, this is a bigger, heftier watch. I believe the Black Bay 58 that this watch is imitating is like 39 millimeters, which is a nice size for a dive watch, especially one that is an absolute slab the way that the Black Bay is. This is a slab as well, the design is pretty on point, but it's 42 millimeters and it weighs so much. I think it's like 182 grams, and you feel every one of those grams. So let me get this thing sized up. Here it is, sized for my 7.5-inch wrist. I might have the biggest wrist in the watch YouTube space, but who's measuring? Now this is about as big as I would want to go for a watch, and I think it's more heavy than I'd want to go. One thing that I think Pagani Design has intentionally focused on is getting the weight right so that people can feel like they're getting a premium watch. We associate quality with heft, which is kind of a silly notion, but it is real, and often collectors will choose stainless steel over titanium for this reason. This is too heavy, but you get the idea. Obviously, the finishing for this watch is not at the level of Tudor or other watches in that price range, but to me, that is silly to nitpick. The bracelet, though it is hefty and solid feeling, is not very nice. Doesn't articulate like high quality bracelets, and it actually binds up at certain places. The clasp is pretty nice though. It's not bad, and the finishing looks okay. Overall, the color for this watch isn't quite right. The blue Black Bay 58 is just amazing, and this in this color is not great. And of course, the size and weight kind of kills it for me. Now, the PD1717, meant to homage the Longines Spirit 37, is much more interesting to me because, well, I think it's much nicer. The dimensions are closer to the original. This is 38 millimeters, not 37, which I actually prefer. But this one is thicker for sure than the Spirit 37 that I have handled a bit. The bracelet for this Pagani is specific to this watch, I believe, and it is nicer than the bracelet on the Black Bay Homage. It articulates better, though the clasp of course feels cheap. The finishing is pretty nice on this watch and on the bracelet. I think the design of the bracelet is interesting. It looks a bit cheap, but it is sort of a copy of that Longines bracelet. Nowhere near as nice though. It's also a little weird right here where the bracelet meets the case. I'm not sure what's going on. What's really interesting is the dial and the way that Pagani design copied those diamond inlets on the dial. That is all pretty nice. This blue-gray kind of slate color for the dial, which is, very sunburst, is really amazing. I like this watch, and I think this is where Pagani design shines. Sometimes their watches feel really quality and look really nice. I mean, this was $80 shipped to my door. That is insane. And then sometimes they kind of missed the mark, and I think you're seeing both examples here. I'll be honest though, after wearing these watches for a week, I don't totally get the appeal of a watch that is mimicking a much nicer, more iconic watch, especially for the Longines copy. I've wanted a Longines for a while now, and I just feel like a poser wearing this. But what I do get is the appeal of spending a fraction of the price and getting a truly quality feeling watch that gives you that kind of luxury experience, that feeling of something really nice and substantial, but that you didn't have to pay an arm and a leg for. And again, heft is where Pagani is knocking it out of the park. These watches have that heft that's associated with luxury, whereas so many cheap watches, the bracelets feel like plastic. Like, why isn't Seiko making this watch? Not this watch exactly, but something like this. A $150 piece with sapphire and automatic movement, literally this automatic movement, the NH35, and a watch that gives you that premium feel at the very least. These watches from Seiko, these would cost you at least $600, $800. Now, maybe that's just the reality of labor costs, I'm not sure, but these do feel pretty nice. What I do think is that these watches sort of poke holes in the whole luxury watch system. Water resistance is a good example. On basically all of Pagani design watches, they have 200 meters of water resistance, and owners will tell you these watches are great for diving. They basically all have screw-down crowns as well. This is how we know that we're kind of getting shafted with all the different water resistance options for watches in manufacturers' lineups, as well as screw-down crowns making the watch cost way more because it has that extra water resistance and a screw-down crown. That is just ridiculous. If Pagani design can make a specific bracelet for one watch and then give that watch a really solid, well-executed screw-down crown for $80, then there's no reason that the other manufacturers can't at least offer it on pretty much all of their watches. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. Hope you guys enjoyed looking into this world of Homage watches. It's pretty strange. Let me know if you've had any experience with this brand. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one.